Hi, everybody. Very nice that you are all back in this third episode of our talk show. Wonderful to be here again in the studio, to be together to speak about science and its impact on society. I hope you came here through the beautiful movie that we just saw. Luc van Ewijk, as always, so nice. The brain, actually, in this movie. That's also the topic of this evening. The brain, the mind, technology affecting the brain. How does the brain work? How do we cope with disaster in our lives? How can the brain deal with that? How can technology influence the brain? What is the ethics of this? To be short, how can we read the brain? How can we intervene in the brain, adjust the brain? A lot of things to discuss this evening. In studio, we'll do this with Femke Nijboer. Welcome that you're here, working at our university. E-health is what you're working on now, but you have been working a lot on the brain, interfaces to read the brain, to influence the brain. We'll speak much more about that later. Siska Heida is our online guest, researching how we can influence the brain. DBS, influencing the brain with electrodes deeply implanted in the brain, activating certain parts of the brain. We will talk with her later. Jenny Hofmeijer is here also on a movie, 2 movies actually, working in the hospital as a neurologist, also at the UT, working on people in a, you could say, coma, and studying how the cells in the brain work, or better, maybe do not work anymore, and how we can make them work again. Erik Kemp is there, of course, as every month again, with his column Show Me the Data. And we have culture, music, utmost, jazz, big band. So a full evening ahead of us. But first, Femke, welcome again. Very nice that you're here in the studio, to see you here. We see each other so often downtown, but now finally in the studio. And you brought a lot of props. They look a bit scary, to be honest.
Yeah, they don't bite. Don't worry.
Can you explain a little bit what you brought with you?
Yeah. So I used to work in the field of brain-computer interfacing, and I made brain-computer interface for people with locked-in syndrome. So you use your brain signals to communicate with computers or with whatnot. And I started to collect also commercial brain-computer interfaces like this one or this one.
Wow.
And I now start to have a collection.
Wow. So what do they do? Can they influence the brain, or do they read signals from the brain?
Yeah, they read signals, well, from the brain, from your head at least. And then, for example, this one wiggles, it doesn't work at the moment, but it wiggles its ears according to your emotion. So if you're sad, the ears go down.
Wow.
And this one can measure panic.
Oh, wow.
You can try it if you like.
Okay. Why not?
You can, if you can take it yourself and place, the sensor should be on your forehead.
Okay.
And then you have to strap it around your,
Let's see how it works.
There's a button on the left side,
Like
the red button. Yeah, you have to press that.
Yeah, I can't see
it.
But
Yeah,
here.
there.
Okay.
Press it.
Yeah, press it. Oh my God.
And now it starts to calibrate. So it's reading your brain signals and determining what is the normal mode of your brain. Yeah? And while you do that, now I ask you to close your eyes for a moment.
Okay.
You have your eyes closed.
Yeah, now you're going to make me panic.
And now I have to bring you in panic.
Okay.
And I assure you, did you get a good life insurance?
Yeah.
Open your eyes, please.
Oh, no! It doesn't work at all.
You don't get panicked at all.
Oh, sorry.
This is not scary.
Maybe
okay.
I've seen the dentist too often in my life.
Okay. So so the thing doesn't work. That's a pity. No. Still green. It's still green. You're completely zen. You're completely relaxed.
Good. Well, maybe I'm just in my
focus
of energy. So shall I take it off?
You can take it off. Yes.
But so it could have worked. It could have told if I were.
Well, that tells you how well the commercial brain-computer interface work at the moment.
Yeah, okay.
But this is an innocent, nice gadget. But also Elon Musk is working on it with his company Neuralink, and also Facebook is working on trying to decipher your thoughts and your language. So it's interesting why are such companies doing that?
But can you actually do that? Can you indeed read the content of the brain through such an interface?
If you have implanted electrodes, and if we confront you with letters and words long enough, eventually we could guess which word you are reading or imagining. But it takes a lot of this calibration.
So that really means that reading someone's mind is not impossible in the end.
The mind or words is a different constructs.
Okay.
But yeah, and you have to play along. If you don't play along, it doesn't work.
So have you actually been doing this with people also to tell what's going on inside their brains?
No, not their thoughts, but I've tested this on many patients, and they can use it to communicate or to spell letters or move a cursor or move a wheelchair.
Wow.
We also Twittered with it.
Really?
Yeah.
So then you use it actually for people who cannot use their limbs, for instance,
Yeah.
and then you can read the signal from the brain and enable them to operate their wheelchair.
Yeah, originally this is all invented for people with a physical disability.
Okay.
So they can still at least have a communication channel.
Wow,
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Let's speak a bit later about this more, because that will be much more on the brain, but your current work is about e-health.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe your work is on the brain and on the mind, as it were, because now I think it's more about lifestyle interventions, helping people to live a healthier life.
Yeah, and especially for older adults, we try to help them if they want to have a lifestyle change. So if you can eat a little bit better or more, for older people, eating more is very important, that you stay well nourished, that you exercise, that you get enough sleep. And if you do that, you can prevent a little bit potential cognitive decline.
Oh, wow. So it's not directly on the brain, actually.
No.
It's more about people's behavior.
Yeah, I think I've shifted my work a little bit from trying to fix the brain, trying to fix diseases, to prevention of diseases. And I nowadays think that's much more important to focus on the body than only on the brain.
Yeah. There seems to be a parallel, though, I just think, because they both seem to try to help people restore some normal situation, as it were, right? Yeah. And maybe for intervening in lifestyle, there's also a risk maybe of some forms of paternalism, right? That you try to somehow prescribe people what a good way of living life is.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I find that very difficult. Also in the brain-computer interfaces and the neuroscience, applied neuroscience, really now defines that there is a new kind of normal, what is a normal brain or an abnormal brain. Yeah. And also we scientists, if we define what is good food and what is unhealthy eating. Yes. So we have a research line called happy eating, and I prefer this this phrase.
So how do you then determine what happy eating would be? Do you try to listen to what people themselves want and to empower them?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's very with co-creation and bottom-up research. What they want is what we should do, I think. And we also know that social factors in happy eating, they help people eat more or more controlled. So it's much more important also for longevity, for living long and healthy, that you have friends, for example, than that you take your medication.
Wow. Okay, so it's not that you have this pre-given standard, let's say, let's force people to eat this much of food. It's more that you let them discover how they themselves would like to live their lives and to enable them to do that. Wow. If we then take it back to brain interfaces, then I think this theme happens there as well, in the sense that there's a lot of discourse about the cyborg half human, half technology. And on the one hand, people see that as a way to do human enhancement, as people say, to make better humans. Kind of a problematic concept maybe, because who's going to decide what a better human is, right? And on the other hand, there's also a whole field of disability studies of people saying, well, actually, this also gives a new way of looking at disability. So maybe we have to accept that everyone is, in a sense, disabled, as it were, or abled in different ways. So how do you stand in that discussion about human enhancement?
Yeah, I think it's very strange to discover that there are two separate worlds. So you have the world of high-tech cyborgs, and they have conferences in very nice places with lots of nice show effects. And you have the world of disability and rehabilitation, which takes place in small centers. And we consider rehabilitation of disabled people good, and enhancement of normal people to superhumans as bad somehow. I don't see this really. I just see it as a big continuum, a spectrum of diversity.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, there are also people who do not think this is a bad idea at all to make us better humans. And they actually believe in some kind of a fantasy that we will move beyond the current human.
And also people with disability are fascinated. Why would you go back to normal if you can be superhuman?
Yeah. exactly. So maybe in a sense you could say that working on cyborgs or working on stuff that you are working on, have been working on also, helps us to rethink disability.
I think so, and what the norm is. Yeah,
exactly.
It's liberating.
In a sense. That's wonderful. I suddenly recall Donna Haraway's work. I'm not sure if you know her work. No. Donna Haraway is, I think in the 80s or the 90s, she wrote the Cyborg Manifesto, celebrating that, the cyborg shows that we are not bound to our bodies to define our essence. Actually, it was a feminist piece of work. Yeah. So if women have always been linked to their bodies and the fact that they can get children, etc., and then that's a way to define a person only in terms of body. But the cyborg makes her own body, right? So there is no instinct. So indeed, so that is a nice parallel, I think, between your current work and the attempt to avoid forms of paternalism on the one hand, and seeing the cyborg also as something liberating. Wonderful. We will speak a bit more about that later, I think. But maybe it's good to dive now a bit more deeply into influencing the brain, deep brain stimulation, and to ask Siska to come on the screen to speak a bit more about that. Siska Haida, welcome online.
Good evening.
Wonderful that you're here. You work in the same group as Femke, Biomedical Signals and Systems, focusing on neural engineering, or maybe in better words, how does a neural signal system connect to devices, in a sense. So, you are a specialist in deep brain stimulation. So can you maybe say a little bit more about that? What is that technology and for what do you use it?
Yeah, the brain stimulation, or DBS in short, can be used in movement disorders. Also, for example, Parkinson's disease. That's the largest group that we focus on in our research. And the brain stimulation is the electrical stimulation of the brain. So a small area of the brain is stimulated. It's not really a communication. It's mostly a one-way communication. So the stimulation is driving the neural system. And if the right target is selected, then the symptoms of the disease can decrease.
Okay, so you put a signal into the brain with a very specific electrode, I guess, as you have to be, I think, quite precise where you put the electricity then. And so what kind of things can you do with that? What kind of diseases can you help to cure or somehow deal with?
Yeah, so movement disorders, essential tremor, epilepsy, dyskinesias or dystonia can be treated, but also other types of diseases or disorders are being tested. So psychiatric disorders are also being tested. So it can be used in a broad sense, but the main thing still is that we do not really know the exact mechanisms of the stimulation. So that complicates the use of it in a broad sense.
Okay, and so actually this might also connect to the whole issue of human enhancement somehow, right? So could you also, by using electrodes in the brain, let people perform better, as it were, or let them feel happier or more energetic, or people who are more somehow aggressive become more mild or something? Can you do all these things?
Well, indeed, yeah. Depression also can be treated maybe with the brain stimulation. So far it's only used for disorders, but it can also be used in the healthy system. Okay. Maybe it's good to show a short video fragment of a patient using the brain stimulation just to see or to show the effect. So the first fragment shows a person with the brain stimulation. The pulse generator is implanted in the shoulder cavity, so patients can control the pulse generator with a remote control. And as you can see in this fragment, this patient now just switched off his stimulation.
Parkinson's disease patient, I think.
Indeed, this is a Parkinson's disease patient. Okay. Yeah, so immediately the tremor appears again. He has more difficulty with movements, bradykinesia, akinesia. So a slowness of movement and also a lack of movement can occur in Parkinson's disease. And quite clearly, his gait has become a shuffling pattern.
Wow. Okay. And then, so he switches off the system. So that means that he can somehow switch himself on or off, which is also quite a fascinating thing, I would say. But what does that...
yeah. Patients often have some control over their stimulation settings. So the amplitude sometimes can be adjusted a little within a range that has been specified beforehand. But also, indeed, turning on and off stimulation is an option for most patients. So in this second fragment, you see that the stimulation is switched on.
Okay, wow. Let's look at it.
And almost immediately, tremor disappears. Patients experience this also as, a brake has been released, and that's maybe, quite nicely shown by the expression of this person.
Wow, wonderful.
And also it has, improved, of course, significantly compared to the previous fragment.
Wonderful. So actually, this person can switch the electrode on and off, or the device on and off, and therefore control the effects of Parkinson's disease on his movement. That must have a lot of impact, I think, on yourself. Maybe also the fact that once you switch the system off, at some point you might not even be able yourself anymore to switch it on again. You might need somebody else, your partner. Or is that true? How do people work with this in practice?
Well, most of the time, the stimulation is switched on continuously. So and sometimes patients just use this remote control to switch it off only temporary. For example, speech can be impaired a little by the stimulation, so it might be helpful to just switch it off for some time and be able to communicate with people, and then afterwards, turn back on the stimulation.
Exactly. Okay. And are there also side effects? I mean, does it always do what you want it to do, or can also complications occur?
Yeah, side effects can occur. We think most side effects are related to neighboring structures in the brain that are activated as well. So we focus on a very specific nucleus in case of Parkinson's disease, and that nucleus is divided into different areas. One of the areas is the sensory motor area. So we aim at that area for the stimulation so that it reduces the motor symptoms. But surrounding areas are involved in emotion or memory. So if those are affected by stimulation as well, you can indeed create some side effects. And side effects can also consist of paresthesia, so a tingling sensation in limbs or in the face area. But it's often, the brain stimulation is reversible. So if you change the settings a little, you can avoid side effects.
Okay. I've heard examples of people who become almost manic because of this implantation, right? So they, start to buy more things than they wanted to buy, or they even end up in all kinds of extra love relationships that they would normally not enter into, and that seem to be connected somehow to the parts of the brain where the whole stimulation works. Is that indeed something that occurs often? And if that's true, how can people cope with that?
Well, this occurs only in very rare situations or occasions, and still, the stimulation can be adjusted a little so that these side effects will not occur that often anymore.
Okay, that's also good to know. And of course, as you said, you can always you can also sometimes interfere in your emotions. That might be, of course, a totally different type of specialism than the one that you are working on. But maybe you also know a little bit about it, because somehow I think this is a dazzling thing that we can do. If the brain is the organ that gives us freedom, and we have now a technology that helps us to tweak the brain, then we get some kind of a freedom regarding our own freedom, as it were, and some kind of a meta-freedom, which causes a lot of questions, I think. So if you can tweak how you feel, how energetic you are, how peaceful you are, then it must be very complicated to deal with this. So do you study in your field also these psychological aspects of the brain stimulation, or do you mainly focus on the neurological elements of it?
Yeah, we mostly focus on the neural elements, but in Parkinson's disease, cognition is an important aspect as well, so interacting also with the environment. We focus on the motor symptoms and not so much on other side effects or symptoms you would like to induce.
Okay. Now, I understood that you also use other techniques to help people with Parkinson's to walk. Cueing, as it were, as some kind of a neuromodulation technique, giving people visual cues. Can you explain a bit about that?
Yeah, it's the perception of visual or auditory stimuli. So, for example, a zebra crossing can work very well for Parkinson's patients to walk quite normally and fluently. The same similarly, also auditory cues can be used. So it's a pattern that can be used to walk more effectively. So a constant beat of a metronome, for example, but also music can be helpful for Parkinson's patients to especially walk better. And I also have a fragment of cueing. And in this fragment, you see a patient. This is, you see stripes on the floor in this instance. And this patient is experiencing freezing of gaze. So that is like you're glued to the floor. That's how patients experience it. And with specific types of cues, this freezing can be prevented or overcome. Incredible. And be helpful in, especially in gait.
Incredible. So that means that you can then help people without influencing their brains. Just with a visual cue, you can reach similar effects.
Well, indeed, it's also a neuromodulation technique. So still, it's affecting brain functioning, or maybe it's even using parallel pathways. So the damaged pathways can be blocked more or less, and parallel pathways can be used in a good manner. Also with cueing, we do not really know the exact mechanisms. So it could be that more attention is paid to the movement itself, so that makes it more easy to perform the movement. Especially maybe the visual cues could also scale or help scaling the movement. So for example, these bars, if the distance is too far from each other, if they're too far from each other, then it might not work at all. And so it's also the scaling of the step length to these bars that might be an effective mechanism.
Wow, fascinating. Thank you so much. So interesting. Yeah, Femke, of course.
1.5 meters, is that the right cue for Parkinson's patients? Did the society become better for them? Or?
I think it's a bit too much.
Okay, it's too far. Okay.
Then we need deep brain stimulation anyway. Wonderful question. Siska, thank you so much for your interesting words. It was very nice to hear this. Super. So, we move ever deeper into the brain, you could say, from reading the brain to influencing the brain to looking at the brain cells. Jeanette Hofmeijer will be the next one on stage, but only on video. Well, only, it's nothing at all, on video. A neurologist at the Rijnstaten Hospital in Arnhem and also working at the University of Twente, neurophysiology, interviewed by our editor-in-chief Hiska Bakker about her research concerning people in a coma. So how do their brain cells work? How do they interact with each other, if they interact at all? We have 2 movies. Let's first watch the first movie by Jeanette.
We are here at the TechMed Center of the University of Twente in the intensive care simulation room with a simulated human being lying over here and with Jeanette Hofmeijer.
Part of the research in our group indeed focuses on what is called cerebral ischemia, which is a lack of blood flow to the brain. It is mostly assumed that lack of blood flow to the brain quickly leads to irreversible destruction of brain cells. We discovered that for a broad range of conditions, lack of blood flow to the brain does not lead to immediate destruction of brain cells, but to dysfunctioning of brain cells, to the stop of communication between brain cells. And that is not immediately irreversible. We, for example, think of patients after a cardiac arrest. And this period of insufficient blood flow to the brain may have caused brain damage because of lack of oxygen. For that reason, most patients after a resuscitation are comatose. But with our research group, we actually discovered that this lack of oxygen to the brain suppresses brain activity in itself. And we also discovered that the longer this suppression lasts and the deeper this suppression is, the smaller the probability that the patient eventually recovers. And this led us to conclude that artificial stimulation of brain activity might enhance brain recovery rather than suppression of brain activity. So that is where we started experimenting with stimulatory treatments, so stimulation of brain activity.
So the first discovery that they did in her group is that brain cells don't die immediately if you're in a coma. They just become inactive somehow. I was wondering, so I happen to know that you have been working a lot on people with locked-in syndrome. Mm-hmm. Is that similar to being in a coma? Do you know anything about the brain cells, for instance, of people locked in?
In the beginning, after they had, it's caused by a brainstem stroke, so also a clot in the brain vessels, and then you are probably for a short while in a coma, but then you wake up and you're probably still paralyzed, so you cannot move, you cannot blink your eyes, so you cannot indicate to anyone that you're conscious again. Wow. And this will be difficult for the doctors to tell that all of a sudden you're conscious again.
So the doctors might think you're in a coma while you are not in a coma. Yeah. But then your brain must be much more active in a sense than people with who are in a coma.
So the idea now is that if you use neuroscience, if you measure the brain in an early stage, maybe you can detect if somebody's conscious or not.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. And then it's often the family who discovers that somebody is more conscious than we think.
Wow, incredible. So let's go to a second video where Jeanette explains how we can reactivate the cells in the brain quicker. Let's watch the movie.
In our group, in our laboratory, we have a brain model that we call brain on a chip, that consists of cultured mini brains. In our mini brains, we tested treatments based on stimulation of the neurons. And we can apply various forms of stimulation, electrical stimulation, stimulation with light, but also stimulation with medications. And one of these medications is ghrelin. Ghrelin is a naturally occurring hormone that we all have in our body, but it also works as a stimulatory medication, a so-called neurotransmitter that stimulates the brain cells a little bit. And we discovered that in our model, treatment with ghrelin improves brain recovery after an artificial arrest, so after oxygen and glucose deprivation. That is a new discovery, and all this evidence together provided us with the opportunity to translate these findings to our hospital, where now we are conducting a clinical trial in comatose patients after cardiac arrest, in which we test whether ghrelin treatment improves recovery of those patients. I'm collaborating with experts that are actually doing the lab work, and those are Joost Lefeber and Monica Frega. I'm primarily a medical doctor, a clinical neurologist, and my primary place of work is the hospital, where I work with patients, develop new technologies to measure brain activity in my patients. And this research group, this diverse research group, gives me the opportunity to very closely collaborate with engineers and biologists to safeguard that what we do in the lab is clinically relevant and clinically feasible. So I strongly believe in the power of such collaborations. And that is one of the questions I would like to ask. Could you think of measures that may improve collaboration between experts from very different disciplines?
So, Femke, that's actually quite interesting to hear. Science is team science, and not only a team within the same discipline, but between disciplines.
Definitely.
So, how can we do that? How can we promote better cooperation between disciplines? Do you have any vision on that?
Yeah, I think applied neuroscience is it's doing that automatically, because if you want to build a brain-computer interface or coma detection, you need math, you need electronics, you need neuroscience, you need psychologists and ethicists. Yeah. And the patients or partners themselves, the families, to make it work.
Super. I mean, the UT seems to be the place to do this also.
course.
Also, there's of course. Well, because of all the social sciences that we can also engage in all this type of work that we are doing. Wonderful. So there is a technique to reactivate the brain cells. I'm not sure if you could give an answer, but do you think that this could help people with locked-in syndrome, or is this way beyond your expertise?
Well, most of the brain of people with locked-in syndrome is intact, but you would have to revive their brainstem, and the tissue there is really dead after the brainstem stroke. So I don't think you could do that.
Okay. So
speculating. But
no, but I mean, if the cells have died, then this is
it's gone,
quite a radical form of being inactive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you have actually been working quite intensely. You are still working quite intensely, I think, with a locked-in patient.
Yeah.
Paul Trossel. You even brought a book that you wrote with him.
Yeah. Paul used to be my research participant. But we became friends and later even colleagues. So instead of studying him, he was studying me and giving me advice on how to cope with life events. Wow. And we decided to write a book about lust for life and how you can deal with life events and bad luck.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Paul is a locked-in patient.
Completely locked
in. He can
in.
only move his eyes.
He can move his eyes and his left thumb.
Wow.
And we communicate with his eyes, and he can operate a computer.
So that goes very slowly, I guess.
Very slowly. Slow science.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So, and then you write a book about lust for life. So you must explain this. So apparently Paul is a very...
He is full of life.
Resilient.
So yes,
okay.
Yeah. He likes Formula 1. He likes to go to his favorite soccer club, FC Utrecht. I don't know why, but okay. Maybe it's the brain damage, right? And he enjoys going on holidays to swim with dolphins, and he does a lot of things. Starts a new company, writes a book, becomes a speaker with me, without a voice. So it's a nice example of how you can focus on the things you can do instead of what you can't do.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So, did you learn any lessons from that? I mean, it's by the way, it's amazing to see how easy you move between the brain and psychology, everyday life. It's wonderful that you can do that. But of course, I think one of the biggest issues now in the crisis that we are in is mental health. Many students are having a lot of mental health issues.
Yeah.
Is there a lesson that they can learn from the book that Paul and you wrote?
Yeah, well, Paul was telling me through email that he's been in a lockdown since 12 years now.
Lockdown.
And he has been, the last 3 months he spent on 4 square meters, trapped in his own body. So we have to, how do you say that, weigh our own misery compared to his a little bit. And I asked him, do you have some advice for people? And he said, you have to try something new. You have to teach yourself a new skill.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's how you can cope with the challenge.
Yeah.
Find another field to play.
I think he's planning a trip to Brazil somehow.
Incredible,
so
wonderful.
He's just focusing his...
Well, I hope that this will be good advice for all of us. And indeed, I think the whole idea that we can recover in a different way, with a different society from the crisis, might also be something that gives us energy.
And we see that often with people who are paralyzed, is that your happiness does not depend on your body necessarily.
Yeah. Wonderful.
It depends on other things.
Fantastic. Wonderful. So read that book, I would say. Wonderful. So let's go to the next item, a completely different topic. Erik Kemp with his monthly column on data visualization. Last week we chose a new House of Representatives, a new parliament in the Netherlands, which of course has a lot of implications for science as well, and for mental health probably. And actually Erik made a very beautiful visualization to show how the size of the parties has evolved over the past decades. So let's watch it.
Hi, welcome to the 3rd episode of Show Me the Data. We're going to take a look at the Dutch election results. And not just the recent one, but all elections since the Second World War. Today's chart is created by Frederik Ruys, an independent information designer and data journalist. He named it The Dance for a Seat in Parliament. Let's zoom in to 1946. You can see that there were 7 political parties who got at least 1 seat. In this chart, the number of seats per party is visualized by the thickness of the colored bands. The black vertical lines connect the coalition parties, so those in power. The rest of the parties form the opposition. We see 3 cabinets led by Prime Minister Willem Drees. Interestingly enough, only in his last term, his own party, the PvdA, got the most votes. In that same year, 1956, our House of Representatives grew from 100 to 150 people. You can see that the whole chart becomes wider. Eva Jinek called this chart the spaghetti of Dutch politics, which really starts to make sense right about here. There's so many new parties joining. Then, in 1977, 3 parties decided to band together, eventually forming the CDA 3 years later. You can also see which coalitions didn't last long, such as Van Acht II here in 1981. Afterwards, in 1994, the playing field starts changing. Where the CDA and PvdA have been on top for decades, now you see smaller parties attracting more votes, especially the VVD and D66. Then we see a clear design choice by Frederik. He draws attention to the assassination of Pim Fortuyn in 2002 by adding these 3 bullet holes. Afterwards, the political spaghetti gets really messy. The CDA has a steep decline, and the VVD and PVV rise quickly. Here starts the reign of Rutte, with his blue band firmly at the top of the chart. But I think the most interesting stuff is happening at the bottom of the chart. Why are there so many new parties, 17 in total? I think that when enough people don't feel represented by current parties anymore, new parties have a right to exist. This is actually our representative democracy at best. Although collaboration with all these small parties might be more difficult, I hope that a new type of leadership will bring this splintered landscape back together. Not only to reduce polarization, but also to restore trust in our government. During preparation, Frederik told me that for him, showing the data is only the beginning. He said that once he has the data and the form of the visualization, he wonders, and now what? What are the stories that you can tell with this data? So while today I talked about the kind of things that catch my attention when I look at this chart, I encourage you to look at the chart yourself and to find your own stories hidden behind the numbers.
Erik, thank you again. Deep brain stimulation, you can say. And Femke said it actually looks like the cortex. Yeah. All the strings
layers,
coming.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means that the cortex of the current government is quite
has a lot of
splintered.
layers. Yeah.
Okay.
It's stronger usually, right? Diversity is important. Yeah.
So there were many themes in the last elections, but so health was, of course, a big theme. Mental health maybe less so, and it somehow surprised me because it's such a big issue if you look around you. So, do you have any view on mental health care and how the government should deal with that?
Yeah, but I have a problem actually with the things we have to do at university are very concentrated on what I'm doing, e-health, and I think this is important. We have to do lifestyle interventions and we have to try to become more healthy. But what's much more important is poverty. The place where you're born or the family you're in is much more important for your health than maybe other factors. So I think politicians have to become aware of this much more.
Wow.
Yeah.
And maybe we as scientists also need to engage with those things as well.
We can only do so much, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Maybe yet another reason to believe in the shaping 2030 ideology of the University of Twente. Like
yes.
Society first,
yeah.
Let's try to address societal issues.
Oh, we have the Citizen Lab now, so...
Exactly,
yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, good to hear. So, time is going way too fast because we are already ready for the last video. Culture, our monthly cultural event here live in the show, Utmost this week. A student association working on music at the boundary of jazz and big band. So let's look at the video.
Okay, the date is 28/03/2050. Test 5 on brains of musicians from the year 2021.
This house, every corner, and I feel like by my memories. I can't sit up anymore, pretending that I'm already free. I've been twice trying to stop me. I bring you down like gravity pulls. Can't take back what's been done to me. Last time you made me look like a fool. I'm going under the water. I'm drowning my sorrows and burdens away. I'm going under the water. I'm drowning my sorrows and burdens away. Not no more, no more, no more, no more, don't worry no more, no more, no more, don't worry no more.
A clear jam, though the visuals will need some more work.
Hear students perform. I really hope that we can go back to that situation soon. Let's make one last link to the brain. I've often heard that people who play a lot of instruments, who play a lot of music, have a better functioning brain or would perform better in all kinds of cognitive tasks. Is that true? Do you know that?
Yeah, and I have to think of the synesthesia people.
Yeah.
Who combine colors and sounds in their brain, and if they hear music, they also see lots of sound, and it combines as a big, gigantic thing in their brain.
So how come? How is this connection?
I think I have to speculate, but I think a lot of brain areas connect to each other with them much more, so you can be more creative, more loose.
Okay, so you doing so many things, you must be also playing a musical instrument, no?
Well, during Corona, I learned a new skill. I'm trying to learn how to play the guitar.
Really?
So, yeah.
That's it. Okay, so new books will come. New grant proposal. Super.
And do you play music?
I play the piano actually quite a lot. I've done that for a long time. I don't have enough time for it, unfortunately. Play, actually a lot of jazz, blues, tango a little bit, also with a friend. And when I turned 50, my family, as a joke maybe more, they bought me an accordion because I want to play the tango when I'm on holidays. Of course, a totally different instrument, but I'm trying to do that now. But this is also a humiliating experience. Learning a new musical instrument is really, well, as you have experience with the guitar, starting at the bottom again. Yeah. So I move back ever further, I see now, to the good old piano, which is fun to do, really. Mm-hmm. Okay, I guess this takes us to the end of the evening. Thank you so much, Femke. It was really nice to speak with you on so many different aspects of the brain, the mind, e-health, what's normal, what's not normal, the cyborg, how we can enhance ourselves or maybe not. Thank you so much. Siska, also thank you so much. I don't know if you're still online, and we already said bye-bye, but it was wonderful that you were there. Hi, there you are. Thank you for all your insights. Jeanette, everyone who was online. It was, I think, a very nice episode. I learned a lot. I've enjoyed it as always. And the good news is that we will be back on April 29. There's a new episode of Campus Talks. Stay healthy, stay safe, and see you again on April 29. Bye.